Adobe has officially released AI Generative Extend for the regular version of Premiere Pro, not just the beta anymore. So today I'm gonna be showing you how to use Generative Extend, some creative ways that you can get the most out of it, and then at the very end, I'm gonna be doing some stress tests to show you what it's great at and also what it's not so great at. So stick around to the end because I was genuinely shocked by some of the results that I got, and it really shows us the boundaries of where Generative Extend thrives and where it starts to fall apart so you can know what kind of footage to use it for. But let's just get right into how you actually use it. Once you've updated to the most current version of Premiere Pro, open it up and you should see that everything is the same as normal, except you'll have one additional feature here in your toolbar, the Generative Extend tool. All you have to do to use it is click on it and then click on the end of your clip and drag it out, and it'll start generating the extension immediately. It really is just that easy to use, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that you can only generate up to 2 seconds of footage, and the footage that you use needs at least 2 seconds for the generation to be able to base something off of. And then finally, you will need an internet connection because this isn't happening locally on your computer, it's actually being processed on the cloud. There's also a list of a bunch of other restrictions that will prevent you from doing a generation, but you'll be notified as soon as that happens. And I'll go over some of those solutions a bit later if you come across that problem. Once your generation is completed, it'll immediately just be added to the end of your footage, and there will be a little label here showing you what is AI generated and what's the original footage. And the playback seems to be just as smooth as my original footage. And if for some reason the generation didn't work out properly or you don't like the result, you can right-click this little label here and ask it to generate again. There's also an option to revert to original if you just want to get rid of it. And there's also an option to tell Adobe if you got a good or bad result if you wanted to give them any feedback. You'll also probably notice that your audio has been extended as well, and that this extension is a little bit longer because Generative Extend is actually able to be used on audio as well. And for audio, you can generate up to 10 seconds. Although Generative Extend for audio works best for things like room tone, ambient noise, or something that's consistent and repetitive, not for dialogue. But if you did really want to use it for music, the good news is that they already have the remix tool, which is specifically designed to do just that. Use this instead of Generative Extend. Now, even though it's really easy to use, the most common question people have are, how long does it take and how good are the results? Well, the answer to the first one is that it actually varies from person to person because of a whole lot of variables, but as a baseline, for me, this 2-second clip that I generated took exactly 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Now, if you're somebody who's only used Premiere Pro's remix tool before, you might be frustrated by how long this takes, but honestly, as somebody who's actually generated my own open source AI video footage, this is incredibly fast and I'm really impressed. Now, as for the quality, that's totally gonna depend on the footage that you're giving it. I'll throw up a side-by-side of that first generation that I did, but do stay till the end because there's a wide variety of experiences that you can end up having. But this example is a great one because I literally cannot tell what is generated and what isn't. Even if you go full quality here on YouTube and then go full screen, I don't think you'll be able to tell the difference. I can't on my monitor here locally. It's actually incredible how good it is, at least this example is. Later on, I'll show you some where it doesn't exactly hold up so well. But we'll save that for the end. Let's quickly go over some of the creative ways that you can use this. We'll start by going over some of the ways that Adobe themselves have been marketing this, and then we'll go into some of the more niche, sneaky ways that you can use this. The first one is if you like a moment, but you just didn't hold long enough. Either you stopped recording, or maybe the actor turns when you want them to keep looking straight. Or an example that they highlighted was interviewing somebody and they said something really great, but they kept talking afterwards and you wanted to end after they said the thing that you really liked. In any of these situations, all you have to do is pull back your footage to the moment that you want to extend from. So if I really liked this portion and then everything past here is unusable, cut here and get rid of this. Then choose the Generative Extend tool and then extend from this point. And it'll extend new generated material instead of using the original footage. And this exact example is actually provided by Adobe as a demo when you open up this new version of Premiere. Now, another use case that most people don't usually think of is that you don't have to extend from the end. You can actually extend from the beginning, and it'll generate material before you even began filming. This is great for situations like if you start recording and an actor gives their line too quickly, or if you just want a little bit more footage for more room to build up before a moment that you like. Now, one thing that Adobe has mentioned is that you cannot extend the beginning of a clip and also extend the end of that same clip. Part of the reason, I'm assuming, is because they don't want to generate new footage based on a previous generation, creating an infinite loop of AI garbled mess. But there's an easy way around that. Just duplicate the original footage before you generate, or go back into your project panel and then bring that same clip out onto your timeline and stack it directly above the original. Make a cut somewhere in the middle between both of these and extend the beginning of one and the end of another. Pop them down onto the same layer and now you literally can't tell the difference. and you've essentially extended the beginning and end of this clip, getting around that limitation. But if for some reason you did want to get something that looked like a chaotic, bad AI rendering, there is a sneaky way that you can generate this off into infinity. After you extend a section, duplicate it on top of itself, and right-click the top layer and select Render and Replace. This new layer will now be able to be re-extended, and once it's successful, you can just rinse and repeat this entire process for as long as you have the willpower to do so. In a creative context, this could showcase a character's mental state deteriorating or the world around them falling apart. Over time, I'm sure that we're going to come up with new creative, interesting ways to use this, but for right now, let's just get to some of the technical limitations. First of all, your footage needs to be in a very specific resolution, aspect ratio, and frame rate, particularly these on screen right now. If your footage doesn't match these settings, you'll either need to convert them using Adobe Media Encoder or add it to a new timeline where the settings of that timeline are correct, and then right-click and render and replace this footage, which will then make it be able to be extended. The next most common problem you'll probably come across is if you wanted to extend a piece of footage that's either raw or has a Lumetri color adjustment attached to it. The problem is you're gonna get an error message saying that you need to be in a Rec 709 color space, but that doesn't help you to solve the issue because that makes it sound like my color management settings are off, but they're not, they're correct. The real problem is that my footage is 10-bit, which you can't generate from. And I also have a Lumetri color adjustment attached to it. So if after deleting the Lumetri color adjustment, you still can't generate from this footage, you're gonna have to transcode your footage with Adobe Media Encoder, or if you just want the quick solution, re-add that Lumetri color adjustment you took away, duplicate your footage for safety just in case you want to go back to it, and render and replace like we did in the previous examples. And now you'll be able to extend your footage. Also, just a note, sadly, Generative Fill does not respect transparency at this time. But okay, now that we've gone over some more of those technical pieces, how good is it really? What is it good at, and where does it really start to fall apart? Putting everything else aside for the moment, it seems to be really good at generating extensions for footage that's really consistent. No camera motion or very simple camera motion, or linear, predictable, consistent camera motion or action. So for example, that very first shot at the beginning that I showed you looked incredibly good. But if I take this shot of a woman running with her dogs on the beach, you'll notice that we get some garbled AI mess around the paws hitting the sand. And probably the best example of this in action I could show you is this clip of a skateboarder with a bunch of birds flying in front of him. This is an absolute nightmare situation for Generative Extend because there's so many things going on and it's very difficult to keep track of what is what. And so if I choose the most chaotic point, where as many birds are in front of him as possible, you can see that the end result is a lot of mushy AI mess. These two birds are literally morphing into one. And then again, as a good example, here we have a simple camera push in, and we already have some mushy, chaotic, AI-looking mess happening intentionally in front of our actors. Simple camera motion, not much changing within the scene, and the things that are changing are sort of mushy and chaotic to begin with. This is a perfect situation for Generative Extend. If I pull it forward here and then extend the beginning, this is one of those situations where I genuinely cannot tell the difference. But now let's start to get into where this really falls apart, and we'll save the one crazy, terrible example for the very end. In this example, we have a skateboarder pushing off in slow motion. Normally, this would be a very good situation for AI to show its strength. Simple, predictable motion, but the big problem here that we're gonna come across is the texture of the pavement. Anytime that you have a really detailed, repetitive, but not perfectly repetitive pattern, it's gonna be really hard for Generative Extend to hold that consistently. If I show you the full screen example here, you can see pretty clearly when AI starts to take over. Surprisingly, it's really good with his hair, but really bad with the pavement texture and the texture on his sneakers. And then finally, we have this example of a surfer. You can see that it's a shot of a surfer jumping up into the air and landing back onto a wave. But what I want to do is see what Generative Extend thinks that this should look like if we stop it, say, about here. If we extend the shot for about 2 seconds, what should happen is that he should hit the water and start to go off to the right-hand side. But when I extend this, the result that I get is this. Oh boy. So you can see this as well as a nightmare situation for Generative Extend. Chaotic texture with the water and the waves and all the little particles floating in front. A movement that has to be precise but really isn't that predictable. And it's almost like it knows that things should be moving to the right, but it does it in a way that sort of defies physics a little bit. So I hope after all that you're really able to see what Generative Extend is really good at and where it starts to fall short so that you know what kind of footage to start using this for. And the reason I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this is specifically because of how Adobe has been wording things in their latest press releases. Notably this, for a limited time, you can try it with complementary generations. I do not have any inside knowledge about what Adobe is planning in the future, but when I read that, what it really seems like is corporate language for this is not going to be unlimited and free forever. My guess is that what's going to happen is after a certain amount of time, they're going to start giving you a credit system where you get a certain amount of seconds or minutes per month that you can use to generate new material. Again, I don't know that's going to be the case. That's just my best guess at what I see happening in the future. So my suggestion is use this feature like crazy, and then when it ends up being behind a credit system, you'll already know and have the experience of what kind of footage works well with this and what footage you should start to avoid actually asking it to generate. Because Generative Extend is jaw-droppingly incredible at some things, and it's an absolute nightmare and a chaotic mess in others. And having the knowledge about what situation your footage is likely to fall into might end up saving you a lot of time and money. But guys, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe and check out this video for even more Premiere Pro tips.